I'm Kathy, and 89% of you are likely to have more healthy and functional brain tissue in your head than I do. I am experiencing accelerated atrophy due to the length of time I've had MS and the number of lesions, black holes, etc. in my brain. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about my diagnosis story, and I'm sure we'll see my dog coming in and out. It was about 1979 when I think I had my first MS symptom. It was a numbness that ran down my left outside thigh. And it was kind of there for no reason. It was the same year that I had viral meningitis, along with several of my friends, most of whom recovered a lot faster than I did. I was down for about 2.5 weeks. And during that time, I was running consistent fevers of 103 and 104. My first experience with spinal taps was then super fun. Swore I'd never have another. Ha, ha, ha. I'm a pro now. Let's see. So I didn't say anything about it because my mom was I said something about the meningitis, but I didn't say anything about the numb leg because my mom had MS. She was untreated, a lot sicker than anybody I pretty much know now. And there was no point. She didn't want to hear complaining. So I then went into a very severe depression, and I also associate that personality change as one of my first MS symptoms. Now, my first big thing that told me something was wrong was global left side paralysis. It is a very odd presentation for initial MS. A lot of people show up with optic neuritis, something less extreme than global left side paralysis. I woke up one morning, I was sure I'd had a stroke. I went to an emergency room, they flashed a light in my eyes and said, "You did not have a stroke, go ahead and go home." Now, one of the big things I found out was that having any sort of psychiatric diagnosis in your history will cause people to treat you like you're simply a mental patient and don't know what you're talking about. I went through 4 neurologists before I found someone that was willing to actually run some physical testing on me, kind of the way Dr. Boster described in his video about changing his paradigm on what kinds of testing to do in clinic. But in any case, there's a reflex on the bottom of the foot that either your toes spread or they crunch. And I don't know which one mine did or what it's supposed to do, but it did the opposite of what was supposed to happen. This doctor finally said to me, "Something is wrong with you. There's something going on." And I didn't have health insurance at the time. All of this was costing me a fortune. And he said, "I'll put you in an MRI," which in 1988 was fairly new technology. It wasn't as clear as it is now. They weren't like all cool and 3-dimensional and everything the way they are now, and you roll them around and your doctor shows them to you on the screen after your appointment or during your appointment. Nothing like that. So I went ahead and I had the MRI that he scheduled me for. I'm kind of grateful that that was the first test. He could have done electromusculograms. He could have done myelogram. There were a lot of unpleasant tests that they used to use in the past. And I didn't have to go through any of those because I got in the MRI. Now, what they saw in the MRI, they weren't certain, but it was right parietal, sitting on the ventricle, and about the size of a plum tomato. Bright white. And initially, the doctor called me, this neurologist. I was home alone on a Friday afternoon, and he said, "You have a brain tumor." So that's a pretty horrible thing to hear over the telephone. So I immediately called my mom because this paralysis had been continuing for, and it was sensory too. It wasn't just functional. It was also sensory. I was having all sorts of weird sensory symptoms. This was continuing at this point for about 6 weeks. And I called her and I said, "I have a brain tumor," and she freaked out and I freaked out. And then the neurologist, while on the phone, said, "You need to come and pick up these scans. I have you scheduled to see a neurosurgeon at Ohio State University hospitals on Monday morning, and I want you to take these scans and don't look at them, just take them into him. And so I had to call a friend and get a ride to his office, pick up the scans, which I was not allowed to look at. As I was opening his door to leave, I turned and said, I want Valium. I want big Valium. If you expect me to have this, not look at it, and know I have a brain tumor, I want big Valium. So he prescribed at that point enough Valium to keep myself and my friends pretty calm for about the next 3 weeks. Now, I did not use this Valium like that. I didn't give any away. I just took the pills as they were diagnosed and then threw the rest away after more things happened. But in any case, I was put into the hospital and I met a brain surgeon named Dr. Joe Goodman. I was told that he was one of the best brain surgeons in the world and that he had worked to develop a biopsy technique called stereotactic biopsy, which is where they insert a thin thread through a small hole into the area that's damaged and they pull out a tiny little sample. So this was done. I had a brain biopsy, which is an unusual first step for diagnosing MS. But I had this brain biopsy and I waited and the results came back as demyelinating inflamed tissue. At which point I asked Dr. Goodman, does that mean I have MS? Because that's exactly the definition I had learned when I was looking it up about my mom. And he said, and I'm not joking, no, you don't have MS because your mother has it. So we're not sure what's going on. For the next 2.5 years, I did not have any idea what my diagnosis was. Now, during the biopsy, they had given me 2 days of pre-op steroids. And that was to reduce brain swelling from, insulting the brain by doing a biopsy on it. And I remember waking up in the intensive care unit, and I was fine, and up and talking to the nurses who were entertained because there was no one else conscious on the ICU. And they... one of them scratched her nails up my leg and I could feel it and it was amazing. And I thought, I am the first person cured by biopsy. So, but it wasn't that. It was obviously the 2 days of steroids that had helped that come back. Okay, so fast forward 2.5 years later, I have another pretty severe attack. I have lots of symptoms, double vision, MS hug, all sorts of things. So finally, I take it upon myself to find an MS specialist neurologist. His name was Dr. Kotil Ramahan. He's a rock star in the world of MS. He now works out of Miami. He ran the program at OSU at the time. Now, remember, there was nothing they could really use to treat me. But I did go in to see him. He looked at my scans. He looked at my biopsy results. And he said, I don't know why someone told you that you can't have MS because your mom does, because you can, and you do. So as I've said in previous videos, I called my mom and I told her, and that was the only time I had ever seen my mom actually break down sobbing, because she was sure that my course of the illness was going to be as bad as hers had been. And she just obviously couldn't stand the thought of that being her daughter's life, too. I was like, cool, MS. They had bandied about brain tumor, lupus, ALS. They had, thought of everything, and they were scaring the living daylights out of me. But because of my mother, I knew that I could still live a full and functional life with MS, and hopefully have a care partner as awesome as my dad was. And then I would be able to still make some of my goals and dreams happen. Let's see. So I would go in about every 6 months. Dr. Ramahan was really nice about giving steroids, but then he switched me to one of his partners, and her approach was a lot more cautious. She only liked to give steroids for functional problems. She did not care about sensory problems. She was more concerned about whether or not things worked. And that's when I got steroids, when I would go in and she could see that something wasn't working. But if I had weird sensations, heat problems, all that, no steroids for you. So I often wonder, did that allow more damage than could have or might have happened? Because I think that my brain is shrinking because of a lot of the damage that I had for the 6 years before I was on a disease-modifying therapy. The disease-modifying therapy that I chose was Copaxone. At the time, it was a daily shot. Every day felt a little bit like a bee sting. People would ask me, how can you give yourself a shot every day? And I would say, I picture myself in a wheelchair and I just jab that thing right in. It came with a gun thing you could load it into. And I'd get my big red welt. And I still have a lot of lipoatrophy from being on Copaxone. So that was the next 16 years that I stayed on Copaxone. I felt fairly stable. I wasn't having any more attacks, which seemed fantastic to me. Then I caught the flu in 2013. And when that happened, I was running high fevers, and I saw another neurologist, general, unfortunately, because I was living very rurally. And she put me in an MRI, and she said, your brain's a mess, you need to be on Tysabri. Well, that scared the living daylights out of me, because at the time, nobody knew why Tysabri was really kind of making people get PML, progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. All I knew was I didn't want that, so I delayed starting Tysabri for a year. The 4 years that I was on Tysabri, though, I absolutely loved it. I actually felt better, like a little improved over my previous baseline. Tysabri lasted for 4 years because then my JC virus, and I don't know what the JC stands for, it's somebody's name, virus shot up between the tests that they use. They test you every 3 months for the JC virus antibody. And if you're in the very low range, Tysabri is unlikely to cause you any problems. But I shot up really quickly, so my doctor said no more of that. I had a miserable summer last summer where I had to do 3 months of big Solu-Medrol hits in order to wash out the Tysabri and be able to start Ocrevus, which was my doctor's next choice. Now, by this time, I had moved back to Columbus, and I was fortunate enough to become a patient of Dr. Aaron Boster. Many people know who Dr. Boster is. He is, I think, the current rock star in MS treatment and cutting-edge information. He has a channel. It's through Ohio Health, but it's here on YouTube. You can look it up by putting in his name in the search, and it's Aaronboster, Aaron Boster. I highly recommend his videos for educational reasons, for learning about how to deal with your doctor, for learning a lot of the information that your doctors can't share with you or don't bother to share with you during your neurological exams. Now, I think because of these disease-modifying therapies that I had a pretty easy course. And it wasn't, oh, my poor little doggy. It wasn't until I started seeing Dr. Boster, though, that I really took my life more seriously, improving my life, improving everything about my life. I had this attitude like whatever is gone is gone. But he was able to prove to me that that wasn't true. I worked really hard in physical therapy. Now I'm feeling much, much better. And my dog is kind of indicating that he wants something from me. So I'm going to quit this video now. I'm going to tell you thanks for watching my goofy and kind of weird MS story. And next time I'm going to do a video about pre-existing conditions and how much fun that is. Until then, I hope that you are living your best life with multiple sclerosis. And I want to say to Lacey, I'm really sorry that I haven't gotten back to you. I've been exhausted. So, see you later. Bye-bye, and I hope you're living your best life with MS.